Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know following Shaq is a little bit of a hard act to follow, but we're really glad that you guys came in today. Welcome to the Automation and Democratization session with A+E Global Media. We're going to be talking about how we problem solve in a rapidly changing industry. But first, before we kick it off, introduce ourselves and a little bit about our company. My name is Christina Marino. I'm a senior manager of social and digital analytics. I've been working in social analytics for about 10 years now, in media and entertainment for about 6. I'm originally from Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., but I live in New York now, and I've been there since 2015.
I'm John Worth. I work on the Advanced Data Solutions team at A+E. We're responsible for scoping and prototyping various automation projects throughout the company. I've been with A+E since I moved to New York in September of 2019, originally from the Baltimore, Maryland area. So just, that's us. Next, I want to just introduce A+E Global Media and just some of the content that we've put out.
So A+E Global Media is a global content creator, but our traditional brands are still at the core of our business. Our traditional brands include A&E, History Channel, Lifetime, Lifetime Movie Network, FYI, and Vice. But now we're able to power even more areas of the portfolio and further our reach. So we're on all major streaming platforms. We have more than 50 FAST channels. And then additionally, we have curated library content for our app. And this really results in kind of a more diverse, expansive, and engaging audience of potential consumers.
As Christina mentioned at the top, the business is rapidly changing. Just as a quick point of it, who here still has a cable subscription? And if you're using your parents to watch baseball, it does not count. No? Okay. So that's the point. What was a very stable industry for 40 years or more even has in the last decade or so experienced rapid change due to digital disruption. Traditional subscribers, through Comcast or DirecTV, they've fallen about 45% since their peak in 2010. And then the streaming platforms are now responsible for, about 247 million subscribers. And A&E has content in many of them, which kind of leads me to how we had to change because, we work in the research department. And the question that we're pretty much always getting asked is audience up or down? Be it for the network, be it for the brand, be it for a program, a season, or an episode. And for the majority of time, that was a very easy question to answer in just a couple seconds or minutes because we only had one data source to go to. It was Nielsen. And so, it was a widely accepted currency across our company as well as our competitors, and that was the single source for audience measurement. But because of streaming, the several new data sources have come into the fold, And not only are they, different data sets, but the way that they are measuring audience is vastly different from one another. So, if you're getting, you want to get some file from Hulu, they might be looking at monthly impressions. But if you're looking at something on Pluto, you're going to see daily views. Just as an example, so you're now not only dealing with different data sources, but different KPIs to answer the same question. And so analysts within our research department, they used to be able to answer these questions quickly, but now they've been kind of forced to spend so much of their time aggregating the data from all these different sources, that has taken a time away from being able to advise internal clients on audience measurement insights.
And as John just mentioned, of course, our one-stop data source was just basically gone. So we had to continue to look holistically so we didn't fall behind. So we faced a significant challenge. How do we go from one data source to over 40 plus? And how do we aggregate it in a centralized location so it's accessible to everybody within the business? We started to notice that time was slowly shifting away from strategic insight and more towards data maintenance. So we were really not being able to use that time to best support our business needs. So we were losing time, so how do we get it back? Our challenge, hundreds of hours of manual Excel reports, new data pipelines and unsustainable historical data sets, into an automated process for our growing business. Our job, of course, to leverage the capabilities within Domo to create those efficiencies across our business and to really get our time back. So now I'll pass it back to John, who will walk us through a few examples of how we did that.
Yeah, so as you said, we really needed to get a lot of this time back, and Domo is very helpful in that. And so here's just a couple examples of ways in which we've used Domo to help get some of it back. So while we are getting a ton more data sources for audience measurement, the one that was the single source for the longest time, Nielsen, it's still there. And it's still something that millions of dollars of transactions are conducted upon. But the old methodology for reporting on it, which had been analysts and research going into their online platform, adjusting parameters and exporting something into Excel, is just not sustainable anymore when you have all these different data sources to aggregate into one reporting mechanism. But so one of the lowest hanging fruits was some of the repetitive and manual reports that we were doing that were Nielsen based. They still needed to happen, but we needed to take the manual labor out of it. So this is an example of a manual report that was put together. It was just something that we called internally the daily competitive ranker. Very simply, it just looks at what was the previous broadcast date, looking at the top 50 telecasts that premiered in primetime, and ranking them based on the audience in the 25 to 64 demographic. And then it would highlight anywhere our owned programming for A+E, History Channel, or Lifetime fell in it. But it was taking analysts 15 minutes a day to compile just this one report. And that's 2 hours a week, 7 hours a month. Domo had a lot of different functionality that could help us replicate this and then take the human labor out of it. We were able to just make a simple dashboard. We hooked up some of Nielsen data sets into Snowflake, integrated that using the connectors that they have available, and created a dashboard that very, very perfectly replicated the format and report, findings in the report, ranking the top 50 telecasts in the previous day's prime time, highlighting anywhere where our owned networks would fall into it. And then Domo's triggered report feature would just, we'd be able to say, if the broadcast date increases for, max data available, then update this page and send it out to everyone. It's still very important for, producers, writers, anyone involved in making the shows or content to, see this information. It's very hard to break into this space. And right now, this is still one of the earliest indicators as to how well that happens, before it ends up in the streaming environment too. And there's another example of it. What we kind of learned is that there was a lot of overlap in some of the Nielsen reports that we were making. Like there'd be like a little bit of logic tweak done to one or the other, but it's the same like base data set. They serve like a different function and like different stakeholders, but we realized we can get a lot more value out of just this one like data connection. So this was another manual report that the analysts put together. It took the same amount of time, about 15 minutes a day. And, it was the same thing, but just slightly different. It still looks at only prime time, but it looks at every telecast from every network. It looks at the telecast ratings across various demographics, and then also they would calculate the primetime day part average for each demographic too. But again, like it was just not sustainable for someone to continuously manually compile this, transpose it into an Excel document, and then email it out to the distribution list. Just not something we can continue doing with all the other work that we had. So Domo was not only able to automate and replicate this visually and functionally, but we were kind of able to enhance it by making a dashboard in which, in the old way, all of the historical information in this regard was available through the stakeholders' inbox. So they were like searching through their emails and being like, okay, where was the March 12th prime report? It's not really efficient, but with Domo, you can just make simple dashboards. And with a date filter, we were able to just get this report replicated and centralized for all of its historical data. So the report is not only done for each new broadcast date, but for all of the historical ones too. The distribution list just gets an alert letting them know that the new broadcast date is available, and then they can go to, that provides a link for the most up-to-date one, and then the historical dashboard if they needed to see that.
Okay, so now let's talk all things social. So for anyone that's familiar with working with the social analytics platforms, it's a tumultuous place. One day they can just completely overhaul their analytics platform. Another day they could just remove primary KPIs and you just kind of have to figure it out. Or they could just maybe overnight update an API on pre-existing and pre-built data sets that you have to scramble to now fix. And on top of that, we have new platforms always breaking into this space, like TikTok or YouTube and Snapchat trying to compete in the vertical viewing space like Shorts, and of course Snap has already been with the vertical viewing. Our business was slowly starting to grow into like a multi-million-dollar business, so this started to become extremely important. All eyes were starting to focus on social. And we were very much at the issue of platforms just kind of making these changes. So we really needed to come up with a solution, and unfortunately you guys can now preview the temporary solution that we had, which was living in Excel. This was our database, our Excel database of just YouTube data. This Excel sheet had 3 years of historical data, about 24 different pivots, and so much metadata tagging. But we knew we needed to work smarter and not harder, and now you guys can see my beautiful baby, the combined dashboard. It took a very long time, many tears, but we did that with this dashboard. We were able to enhance it into a cross-platform dashboard, so now this data actually includes YouTube, Facebook, and Snapchat. Previously, the Excel sheet was the only way we could visualize social data because the analytics platforms, they have limitations to users. We couldn't provide it to everybody in the company. We had to build this in an Excel. But now we could actually make it dynamic. We could create our own filters. We could customize the different groupings based on team or by our core brands. If the history team is coming in to look specifically for their show pages, they can have all their customized filters and groupings. This enhanced of data literacy across our business and autonomy within our teams, which was more than fantastic. We were getting so much more time back. So while the original report would take about 10 hours for one analyst to update for just YouTube, because then we'd have to copy that process for Facebook and Snapchat as well, we were able to cut down the time on this to about 2 hours. In addition, we could then automate this, so we had so much more autonomy across these teams to be able to, in real time, pull the insights that they were looking for. Okay, so now we'll move into the meat of the presentation, which is exactly how we actually save time with the data flows. Okay, so it would not be a data conference if there wasn't the iconic Ross Geller quote to pivot, pivot, pivot. And we did exactly that 24 times. So this is the back-end example of my Excel data set, which is just displaying our YouTube data. So what were we working with again? We had 24 pivots. We had over 100 social channels that we were trying to measure on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. And it took one analyst about 10 hours to compile. Obviously, the Excel sheet was extremely unsustainable. It took time out of strategic insights, and that didn't include any time that the Excel sheet just decided to crash or any of the filters stopped working in our pivots. So we had a pivot and a dream. So what did we do? We phoned a friend at Domo, and we wanted to integrate 4 different social data sets into one flow. We column mapped across 21 different metrics, and we built, in this small little screenshot here, our SQL filter, which actually took oh my goodness, it's such a beast, but it pulls out the series name for each social video that we've ever published across YouTube, Facebook, and Snapchat. All-time historical data starting backfill about like 2016. And then, of course, we finally could get so much more time back with that filter. This then also supported some of our key stakeholders like scheduling, programming, finance, as well as talent acquisitions. And we were finally able to answer some of those really nuanced questions like, is there an appetite for a series spinoff based on some of the custom content that we're putting on YouTube? Is long form actually making a resurgence on Facebook, and can we actually measure this based on duration? Can we look to see what successful library content is performing in comparison to maybe what's on air? Is library content performing better on social than on air? And this, of course, cut maintaining data by 1/3. And we were able to work around some of the limitations that we had with the social platforms by connecting directly with the APIs.
So another report that was very much that Domo's data flows were very useful in updating was this custom report that was called the subsequent viewing analysis. So the linear analytics team would put this together. It's still Nielsen based, but it deals a lot more with like the individual panelists. So basically, Nielsen's is a small sample of people with like boxes on their TV, and then they put weights, statistical weights to them, and that's representative for like the whole TV viewing audience. But basically, this report would look at people who watched an individual telecast, and then run back and see what was their behavior with our network for the month prior. Then, after the telecast, what was their behavior for the month after? Hopefully they watched more, but this information is very useful for marketing teams, programming teams, scheduling teams, to just kind of see how their respective levers can be applied to maximize retention and of new audiences that can be acquired through the premieres of something that are a lot of resources went behind. But this took a long time to produce. It was 7 different data runs on the Nielsen platform. It's called NPower. I don't know if anybody here has worked in Nielsen stuff before, but it was very time consuming. So the 7 runs would take about 45 minutes for any analyst to put together. And that kind of caused us to have to be really selective about what programs we're running this analysis on, because it's so time consuming. We have to pick and choose because there's a lot of opportunity costs with that time. But with Domo, we were able to make a data flow. We had a lot of the component data sets already hooked up via Snowflake, but there was just one more that we needed to do with the raw panelist data. So we applied some code to that in Snowflake and then just connected that fourth one. And we're able to make a data flow that replicated the metrics of the report and the format of it in Magic ETL. In addition to it, the old methodology would also require the analyst to transpose it into Excel and then run like a ton of calculated fields to get the actual key metrics that weren't available in Nielsen. This handles all of that for us. So these 45 minutes has now been reduced to seconds. And what is more useful is that it is now readily available for over 37,000 of our own telecasts. So this could translate to about like 28,000 labor hours. So we no longer have to be selective about what we're running this on. And using Domo dashboards, we were able to replicate the actual reporting that we were doing for these metrics. So not only the process of gathering the data, but a smooth pipeline into the actual report. You can see up top was from the PowerPoint that we were putting together. Down at the bottom is a Domo dashboard graph, perfectly replicating that slide. So this again has the output equates to about 28,000 in labor hours, and there's so much added value because we can do it on tons more telecasts now. That is about the long and short of it. So just, I'm sure most other industries are dealing with this digital disruption. I think television definitely got a brunt of it because, they're going from just a single source for so long to, a ton that are, and where audiences are used to be measured a single way that was agreed upon for advertisers and distributors alike and producers. Now you're dealing with tons of different methodologies, so you have to spend a lot of time, normalizing and figuring out how to get like the same insights across all of this. And you need a partner like Domo to get that time back.
Yeah. Are there any questions?
Oh,
wait, hold on, we have a mic coming around, so make sure everybody can hear you.
It was right there.
Right here first.
Hello?
Hey.
Oh, it works. So I resonated a lot with your paid social data set. I didn't catch, were you using the Facebook Domo connectors, or do you add all that data into Snowflake or a data warehouse? And how do you handle Facebook changing their API so often
It's like our favorite.
and stay on top of it?
That was a really good question. We actually had just recently connected to the YouTube and the Snapchat API. We are actually still working on the Meta API. So we've attempted to do it, I think, back in 2018 or 2019, and we had so many issues that we ended up just having to manually continue to export from Meta. Now Meta is continuing to have issues, and we aren't able to do it even the manual way. So we're kind of exploring that option. That's something that we're considering is maybe the Domo connector, other environments. But at least in terms of some of the other social APIs we have for YouTube, the volume's so high that we actually have it feeding into Snowflake and then connected to Domo. Versus Snapchat, our strategy is a little bit lower in terms of cadence on there, so we can connect directly with the API. But we did have a major disruption with Snapchat's API about a year ago, I think. And they changed a few of the ways that their primary metrics were being named. And then they limited and then increased certain metrics. So then we had to kind of basically do an entire overhaul of the pipeline, restructure the data set, and it took probably about 3 to 6 months, only because of a lot of the issues. We had no warning. It pretty much, we had a month and then we had to figure it out. Yeah, thank you.
Got one there.
Somebody else had a question? Yeah.
So I saw you had a point-in-time reporting, an email goes out with this is the current report and these are the previous report. What feature do you use to get that?
For the one that sends out the point-in-time one, the Domo has it's called triggered reports. I think it's relatively new. We didn't get access. I didn't know. We use the scheduled on a time report, but it's a little difficult for that because if Nielsen's having processing delays, then you're going to end up sending a duplicate report out. So if you're just send it every day at 5:30, then it's not ready. Then you're dealing with duplicative emails. But with the triggered report, it's very easy. You can build an alert that just monitors a very specific data change. So in my case, I'm looking for a new broadcast date being added by Nielsen. So max broadcast date increases. Once that happens, that triggers the report that I want to go out. So it's very cool to be able to send these things out just based on changes in data.
Yeah, I had a question. Obviously, it looked like you were replacing Excel reports with Domo reports. How do you kind of manage that throughout the org, and how do you get new adoption? And then also with that kind of two-parter is, what is your team structure? Do you have like a product manager that prioritizes what gets replaced and not, or
Yeah.
Great question.
It is a great question. So, like, in part, you argue, but like, otherwise, the one thing is, like, the people, they're in a position now where, like, they need adoption. Like, because the ones that you're automating the work for are the ones that are just like, they don't have the time to keep up. So initially, I think like 4 years ago, we had a little bit more friction for adoption just because, people get comfortable in doing things the way they're doing it. But now it's just, there's just so much to do. And so they're now kind of asking to adopt, which is better. And so your second question was about like our team structure. Yeah, so this is kind of recent. We've created a new team in our department, which is called the Advanced Data Solutions team. And we basically are just responsible for going across all the different data teams within our department and assisting them on automation projects. So my supervisor has worked with Christina on some of her social projects. I've been working a lot with the linear analytics teams on some of their automated reporting. But we do have like a structure now where there's a manager who says like, okay, they get together, the senior leadership gets together, decides like where the most value can be attained, and then they decide what projects we work on based on that. I don't know if you had any.
Yeah. I'd have to say also the dashboard I'd previewed before, like early on, some working with the creative teams, they're so focused in a creative environment. So then trying to encourage data like driven strategy is a little bit of a different way of thinking. But the great thing with Domo is we were able to make like a very interactive and dynamic dashboard that I think also helps them feel a lot more comfortable understanding the data. It didn't feel as intimidating. It's not just this huge spreadsheet anymore. And then you have all these different customized filters, and there's really not a way to break it, if you're just kind of in the user experience. So I think that also was a little bit of a slow adoption, but now they're completely autonomous with this dashboard. They're able to pull those real-time insights, and I think they're starting to see that value. So it was a slow transition, but eventually now they're just obsessed and now asking for more, which is great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add to that topic, can you tell us a little bit more about the level of effort that is required to create some of these dashboards, just to understand like the break even of that effort in terms of that 7 hours of reporting that.
Oh yeah, so that one specifically, a lot of the effort, most of the effort, I would say, was on the back end, which was just coding. Nielsen makes available like the rawest form of their panelist data, like what the individual person did, and then you can replicate the steps that you'd get on their like online platforms because they make their statistical weights available. But so most of the effort was just in coding replication of some of the runs that we were doing into Snowflake. Once that was done, the ETL I was just doing like on my own, like just as fun. But then it ended up like perfectly replicating the report because that coding was used for another project that was replicating another report. So it ends up being really easy. And like I work in both high code and low code environments. And so like if I'm just like, oh, the data's already in Domo, it was not that much effort once the necessary data sets were in Domo to just build out the magic ETL pipeline that was necessary for making the report. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so prior to the data appearing in Domo, do you have some sort of a data governance where, the data coming in from many sources, you have to standardize so that this is somebody's giving you daily views versus weekly views divided by 7? Do you have, what kind of governance do you have? Do you have data stewards? How do you handle that?
We have a massive internal project that is like specifically designed for normalizing those metrics into like one KPI. it's working now, but it is difficult. But it was done on the back end. But we've developed a process with a lot of time to create some sort of like normalized impressions view that takes all the different KPIs that are offered by the partners and turns it into like one metric. But it takes you be a little creative.
Yeah, definitely a little creativity, art, and science. And then I think it's also the responsibility of each kind of point of content by team to really give those clear formulas, definitions to what these metrics are, so that the team that is supporting it can actually make it cohesive and we can validate it accurately. But it has been, a big uphill project that we're working on, but we actually are getting close to the end. But it's great to see how much the teams kind of come together to really have that literacy across the vendors.
Yeah. But the partners did not make it easy.
No.
Hi, I have a strange question for you. On your reporting, you said that you generate these automated reports to people.
Yep.
Is that just a dump of your dashboard, or are you creating something that would look like a professional report or something that you could send to an actual client?
Yeah, so right now, both. The one that I showed you was the former, where we had a dashboard, but the dashboard was made specifically with the specific goal of replicating a report that was already being made. We have another one that I didn't show, but we have worked on and finished kind of between us doing this deck and coming here. But Domo has a really cool, it's called the Campaigns app, and that is one where we were able to replicate more to your point, full normal type of report look, and you can just it allows for HTML light kind of work in it to swap out the key information for the data changes, but then the base, there's words and formatting in there that you can keep standard, just the data related words and visuals change. The Campaigns app, ask your CSM about it. It is awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I saw another hand over here before. Oh yeah, okay.
So I work a lot in the high and low code aspects as well. And so looking at something like a data flow that we have constructed many of, and specifically with regards to the topics of interest at the conference, which is AI.
Yeah.
What sorts of AI functionalities that they've been discussing or announcing that you particularly find interesting do you plan on maybe in the long term implementing into something like, a simple data flow or any other data source you might use in a dashboard?
Yeah, I'll let Christina start because she was talking about a really cool one last night. So you want to, the one with Nate, the video one.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. So we've been trying to understand how we can be more efficient in terms of content on social. Of course, we've got millions and millions of assets that we publish online. And so how do we kind of bucket these in really unique ways? So one of the ways that we're looking at is using AI to help us bucket in terms of genres. So is it a data dump? Is it something different? So this is kind of in the explorative phase that we're in. And then I can't remember if there was another part to that, but basically that's kind of where we're trying to, how can we use AI to create efficiencies in areas that we could probably use that time back? So is it just bucketing the data? Is it tagging the data? Is it, customizing it? So for example, for YouTube, we have a lot of our proprietary tagging for our series codes, but on Facebook and Snapchat, it's a little bit more difficult because it's short form content. So how can we come up with a system? How can we use AI to almost help to match what we have in our company codes for social content that we already have tagged? And how can we potentially replicate that across the platforms?
Another one from my side is, I was speaking about the different data sets across the different audience platforms. We have a process where, another layer of difficulty that they give it is that not all of them label the show the same way, which is it's a simple but very infuriating problem when you're dealing with millions and millions of rows. So we have a process internally called title matching where we have to make sure if they wrote the Cursive Oak Island versus Cursive Oak Island, and we're exploring ways to utilize AI to like handle that process for us, because like that's still a bit of a bottleneck in terms of manual labor, because they're just, you know, there's so many variations, and then like once you account for like all the observed variations in your code, then that's when you learn of a new one and it breaks the data set. And so AI is going to be, we think, useful for not only capturing all the observed abnormalities, but anticipating one like that it gets to be like, I think this one is not what it says it is and belongs in this bucket. So that's another way on my side. Else?
All right, any other questions?
Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you all.
Yeah.